Bryson Goodwin, and he was interviewed after the game about that tackle.
I missed the interview.
That tackle probably was part of what got him a nod on the Lance Todd voting as well from one of the journalists. He sort of talked about what they wanted to try and prevent him to do if he got that position was prevent him having the ground to put it down in. So he sort of talked about he was reaching across, not necessarily to put Tommy Makinson into touch, but to stop Tommy Makinson having any ground to put the ball in. So that is why Tommy Makinson maybe was reaching more than he normally would be and couldn't quite maintain possession of the ball because of the way they'd sized up how to block him out rather than defend him out almost, which is really interesting and something that I think other clubs might start to talk about now. In the heat of the moment, in the fire of battle, to be able to conjure up that part of your preparation is just another thing that makes these amazing athletes unbelievable.
Yeah, I think what was, when you looked at the replay, what was crucial in terms of contact was Goodwin's contact with the ball, the hand, or the kind of the upper arm that had the ball in it, and that kind of pushed that arm further wide, and it just released the grip because I think it hit the bicep, and it just, the impact kind of loosened the grip on the ball. I think that was the crucial kind of literally moment of impact. But
they weren't going for getting his legs out, were they? They were going for stopping the ball getting down.
Yes, because it doesn't matter where his body is or provided he's in the air. It's all about where the arm is and where that kind of so that was the kind of the crucial contact that made all the difference.
I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? Over the last few weeks, we've seen some more of those Tommy Makinson finishes after the one he dropped in the semi-final, and now he's dropped one in the final. He can only seem to make these errors in big Challenge Cup games.
Yeah, it was a shame because I thought overall Makinson was. Well, you can see that from the meters. He played well for Saints. He was probably their best player.
I agree. He was up there for them. I certainly agree. I actually we'll talk a bit more about players in a sec. We'll just finish off wrapping up the game. At this stage of the game, St Helens kind of had the ascendancy. They got another penalty that led to the Theo Farge try. The try itself was probably a result of defensive fatigue. Do you think?
It was they just overread it, didn't they? So it was. I'm trying to I can't think who he stepped inside of now. I want to say a second. I can't remember. I'll be guessing. No. But yeah, it was. They were clearly, because the balls had been going wide, and they'd been snuffing out the attacks when it was getting to the kind of the centres and the wingers. They weren't expecting him to step inside, and they just overread the play a bit, and he managed to get down before. Before Ratchford got across to because it was split second. Ratchford was nearly there. He just didn't quite get there in time.
It had been like great scramble to cover everything out wide, where there's so much pace and strike from St Helens that a halfback stepping on the inside was actually something maybe that really was the go-to play in this game. But maybe the halfbacks were not strong enough in the decision making in this game for that, but VFI certainly was in that occasion. But just to emphasise the Lachlan Coote drama, just the poor game that Lachlan Coote had, unfortunately for him, who's been one of the star lights in Super League this year. That conversion attempt, what a horror show!
It was horrid. It was. His foot position didn't look right, did it? It kind of skewed completely wrong.
I don't know how he missed it. Yeah, it just never looked like he didn't connect cleanly with the ball. He didn't do anything cleanly, really, in the whole throw of that.
No, it wasn't good.
Expecting from him.
No, and particularly when as you said, I think it's a reflection. It must be a reflection of nerves because they've got all the kicking options. It's not. It must just. I think it's just maybe the occasion was just too much, and he was slightly out of form, and just it led to a poor day at the office for him, really.
Yeah, and then the errors just started mounting up for not just for Lachlan Coope, but for his St Helens colleagues.
It's panic stations, isn't it, at that point?
They dropped the ball on their own line, didn't they?
Yeah.
When they were taking a kick, they dropped the ball inside the in-goal area when they were trying to prevent... very good piece of play from Darryl Clark where he broke up the middle of the pitch and then put the one kick he put through all game, actually. And it wasn't the sweetest kick, but the weight of it was just right. It sat up in the in-goal and Regan Grace couldn't deal with it. The Saints players, there was an element of they started to want to push things, but it never even was that much, was it? It wasn't necessarily them hugely pushing things. It was just them making really basic errors. In the second half, that error figure just mounted up, and they just couldn't execute at all.
No, I think, as you said, the tension, as the clock's counting down, and particularly when if you think of from the mindset, they've got it 12-4, as they're kind of going back to their own half, they're assuming it's 12-6. They're thinking a try and a drop goal, and and then all of a sudden the goal's missed. You need two more tries. You basically back where you started almost.
Yeah.
It's almost like you just kicked a penalty goal. It's that kind of punch in the gut, and it just seemed like, as you said, the errors started to really pick up from that point, really. And as you said, it's they didn't really have a choice but to start pushing that ball, particularly in the last kind of 10 minutes or so.
All the errors resulted in good field position for Warrington, and Darryl Clark was able to take advantage of some tired big men around the ruck to throw a dummy and to squeeze his way through and to score the clinching try, the try that clinched his Lance Todd Trophy victory as well. He'd been a running threat throughout the game. He'd worked incredibly hard as well. He'd paced the game really well from Warrington's point of view, and this just sealed the deal for him to make it, and it was right next to the sticks as well, so Declan Pattengold, 18-4, and that was the final score. And to be honest, the last 8 minutes were pretty much a non-event, with St Helens at that stage really having to throw caution to the wind and weren't able to execute at all.
No.
But totally deserved win from Warrington, totally surprising win, not the kind of performance we expected to light up Wembley, but a gritty, determined performance that had its mistakes in it from Warrington's perspective. You mentioned that Dec Patton, when he kicked out on the full from his own 20-metre line, when Saints were putting some good defensive pressure on Warrington, but Warrington overall always managed to kick long and find the grass, it felt like.
Yeah, no, it's one of those weird games, really, that Saints were brilliant all the way from their goal line to the opposition's 20. They made huge meters. There were lost count of the number of half breaks, the kind of half chances, not full on the kind of opportunities that you'd kind of write down in the stats, but the little bits and pieces. But ultimately, Warrington shut them down in their 20 and scrambled and just did enough to stop them getting over. And then, as you say, that scar tissue of losses just kind of, it builds up, doesn't it? And it becomes bigger than the actual size of the deficit that you've actually got.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of individuals, then let's start with the losing St Helens side. You talked about Tommy Makinson. Did anyone else stand out for you, good or bad, from St Helens?
Let's start at the backs. So, as well as Makinson, I liked Percival's impact. I thought he did a decent job. Lomax was quiet. Farge did okay, probably 7 out of 10. He seemed to lead. Let's not forget Farge's cover tackle on Curry, which would have busted the game completely open. Because if Curry had either gone through himself or passed it to Lynham, it was 18-4 at that point. So that was a crucial impact. So I don't think Farge was the worst impact, but Lomax was off his game. Obviously, Q wasn't great. Forwards, Roby was Roby. Big effort. Couple of half breaks. I think he'd have received more credit if he'd been on the winning side, obviously. Walmsley did good things when he was on. He kind of stood up. I can think of one particular error where he dropped the ball cold, but I thought second rowers were pretty quiet for Saints. They seem to get a lot of the ball when they're standing still on both sides, so I didn't really see much, Tyre had a stupid forward pass and bits and pieces like that. Knowles was pretty quiet other than scoring a try, quote unquote.
He worked hard, and I think that doesn't necessarily get seen, does it? But the players that we've been talking up for the Great Britain side for St Helens are the players that disappointed me the most. Grace made a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Was in position to take some chances and seemed to always get sort of overwhelmed, not emotionally or mentally or whatever, by the Warrington scramble, which he never did any. He didn't do any of those things that everyone talks about, where he gets out of those little spaces, those little holes he finds himself in, and springs out and scores. He never actually threatened, even though he did a lot of running. He never looked like the wire defence never looked like they didn't have him under control or under containment. So that was a shame. Johnny Lomax, I was looking forward to having, to setting Wembley alight with some great stuff across showing up all across the park, running the show. Again, he managed to find himself running a lot of meters, but that's because Saints were constantly coming from deep with the long kicking game of Ratchford and the Patton. But his decision making was appalling in this game, I thought.
Yeah.
Many times there was opportunities to do something different. There was one time where he made a break and he passed it to a guy who was marked when he actually had the better. He'd made the break and then passed it.
Yeah.
To a guy to try and make a break. I think it was to Nguama, and after that, they tried to put on some set moves, Lachlan Coote and Johnny Lomax, and it just never executed it right. It never felt. It was always half a pace the wrong time, half a second late on the decision, or half a second early on the pass. It just didn't line up at all for Johnny Lomax. Someone sent, I can't remember who it was, sent a message to the SLP Twitter, not on a match review, but on the tweet, saying about how that's him out of Great Britain reckoning as far as they're concerned, because he's demonstrated that he's not a big game player. To that person's opinion. Now, I think it's a real shame that Johnny Lomax didn't step up to the stage on this one. And Morgan Knowles, who we started this conversation with, he worked hard, and he did have that bit of adversity early on when he thought he had the try, but him, Peyru, they were disappointing. Off the bench, McCarthy Scarsbrook, I thought, made a really positive impact in the first half, but none of the Saints forwards came out and started the second half well at all, and it took bringing the big guns back on for them to get any sort of momentum again in the game. I thought Walmsley and Thompson back on, but Ashworth, Paolo, they were non-events in this game. It was really disappointing. Whereas all the players who were good made errors. Percival made errors, Grace made errors, Makinson made errors. It just was unfortunate, I think, that they couldn't execute.
Yeah, it feels like, because I think Warrington's game plan was quite smart. As you said, it was kind of Halifax plus, wasn't it? But it was quite limited. It was quite it was probably based on the fact that they've been in diabolical form. We can't forget, before this they've been playing awfully. So you can understand why kind of Price went in with a restricted and kind of limiting game plan, but it was enough, which is it's not good for good for Saints' confidence.
They always had Maymo to bring on if they needed to, and switch things around, and Ratchford would have undoubtedly gone and made them actually have two halfbacks, but they didn't need to do that. And
no,
Philbin was outstanding off the bench. Akawala came off the bench, didn't really play long minutes in the game, it didn't feel like, but had a big impact in the limited interactions he had in the game. He hit hard and he ran hard for not very long, but really made an impact. But Philbin, by way and far above, was the best bench player in this game. So, like you talked about, he made a huge impact. What about the starting front row for Warrington? You know, we've probably had the best two starting front rows in the competition going up against each other, and it was the second best that, as you'd normally talk about it, that definitely came out on top.
Yeah, obviously Hill's first